Well, Rashi will actually say, in Hellenic sense, says like rechilus, right, which means gossip, rachil, and regil. So the word regil means like something which is a habit. It comes from the word regel, like a feet, like the way you go. And rachil is like a peddler who goes and peddles. So these are related words. They relate to the idea of traveling around and sort of getting merchandise from different places and passing it along. So they're different words because one is a good and one is a kut, but they sound close enough, and that there's a relation. Think of like a color spectrum where different shades of meaning. So Rabbi Hirsch had that. I think he used example. He explained many things in this slide how meanings are related meanings in words that sound similar, or one letter is different, but so he might. Look, think about like your heel. You step on the dust, right? Maybe there's the word Ekev. That means heel, and again, it's as a consequence. Moshe is saying, as a consequence of listening to these laws and observing them, Hashem will honor covenants and the covenants that He made with your ancestors and the kindness that He promised for them and their descendants. And that's the basic idea. That happens to be, it's not this, not in the first paragraph. A little bit further into the parsha, we have the second paragraph of Shema. And that's what the second paragraph of Shema is all about. And there's 3 paragraphs of the Shema. The first one is the basic belief in one God. That's the line we're all familiar with. And the rest of it, it's really all one paragraph in the Torah, minus the second sentence, which is stuck in later. The first paragraph of Shema is basically believe in one God and keep the commandments. We have mezuzah, we have Torah study, we have the saying the Shema itself. Those are all mentioned in that one paragraph. The second paragraph of Shema it tells you what happens as a consequence. If you listen to the mitzvot, then there will be rain and peace and prosperity. And if you don't listen to the commandments, there will be famine and war and exile. Right? So that's the concept. It's Ramban, in his famous essay at the end of Parshas Bo, right after the Torah describes the actual moment that the Jews left Egypt, and immediately the Torah records how Moshe told the Jews about some of the mitzvahs that would be observed to commemorate, whether it's the Seder, where you tell over the story to the next generation, whether it's regiving the firstborn, mezuzah, tefillin. And the Ramban has a lengthy discussion of this, and he talks about how the miracles of that story were Hashem's way of demonstrating to the whole world, the Jews at the time, and the non-Jews, and people of all times, really, that there is a Creator, that He exists, that He follows the actions of men, and He guides the actions of men, He rewards and punishes, and He exercises individual providence, hashgacha, right, for each person, etc., etc., etc. And the Ramban said famously that Hashem is not in the business of performing on command for every unbeliever, every skeptic. Hashem says, once is enough. You all know, you've all observed this, and now it's your job to pass it on. That is what we do. We do it on Pesach. We do it anytime. He says, you buy a mezuzah, nail it on your door, and think about what you're doing, and you've just affirmed and confirmed all of the basic fundamentals of the Jewish belief. And anytime he doesn't say this, but like you pay an extra few dollars for kosher meat, you arrange your schedule so that you can get to where you're going before Shabbos. Those are all ways that we confirm. And after a lengthy discussion, he says in the last paragraph, the very end, last paragraph, which he says that these great and public miracles lead to a broader conclusion, which is that there really isn't anything which isn't a miracle. Right? He says one has no share in our religion unless one affirms that no such thing as nature, that everything that happens is really divinely ordained. Because obviously, if Hashem has absolute power over nature and can change around the rules at will, it follows that whenever nature functions, it's functioning only at the good graces of God, and if he only because he wanted to, because he has absolute power. So nothing would work if he didn't want it to. And therefore, the Ramban says all events in the world, whether they take place on a public or national scale, whether they take place on an individual level, are all directly ordained by Hashem, and says a person who does the mitzvahs will be rewarded and will be successful as a result, and a person who does not follow the commandments will be, will suffer defeat and downfall as a result. And the Ramban says, and here's the interesting thing, he says, the kind of national aspect of this is something that the Torah tells us will be evident to all people. If I can find it, the actual wording. That's from these great and public miracles a person comes to acknowledge the hidden miracles that are the foundation of the entire Torah. A person has no share in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu until we believe in all of everything, all of the things that happen to us are all miraculous. There's no nature, no way of the world at all. Whether in a public scale or a private scale. Rather, one who does mitzvahs will be successful as a reward. One who violates them will fail as a result, as a punishment, all based on the decree of Hashem. These hidden miracles will become publicly evident on a national scale when the Torah's prophecies come true in terms of blessings and curses, as the Torah itself says. Later on, we're going to read, all the nations will say, why has Hashem done this to the land? And they will be answered because they abandoned the covenant of Hashem, the God of their fathers. Meaning, Ramban says that this will become well known to all the nations that it's from Hashem as a punishment. That's in Parshas Nitzavim, at the very end of the Torah. The Torah predicts that the land will be desolate and a wasteland. The nations will be astonished at such a thing, but the explanation for it will be understood as it was a consequence of the Jews' bad behavior. And it also says, in a positive sense, all the nations of the earth will see that Hashem's name is upon you, and they shall be afraid of you. And I'll explain this further. So Ramban is saying that in a historical sense, in terms of Jewish, the fortunes of the Jewish people overall, the Torah predicts that the nations of the world will recognize that our failure to live up to our mission results in a destruction for us. Now, I don't know exactly at what time period Ramban is referring to. Certainly the anti-Semites are very happy to point fingers at us for anything and everything. And maybe there's a time, there are famous quotes, the famous quote from Mark Twain, who traveled Palestine in the 1800s, and he talks about how desolate it was, and it was unimaginable. You can't even imagine what it was like that this land was inhabited. So certainly, that marveling until Crosby came back, then suddenly decided that it was the Palestinians' land and we took it. But because until we came back, it was just a wasteland. Once we came back, it suddenly started. That itself, they point at it, it's kind of Mark Twain. Well, he was earlier than that. He was like the mid 1800s, I think. And he commented. I don't know the whole quote. There's a small snippet that they always quote, which he just describes how dreary and desolate the whole place was. But the point is, and at this point, I present the very fact that the whole place was kind of this dump, and all of a sudden you just come back, and suddenly it's this coveted piece of But at least the fact that it's always in the spotlight, and that certainly that is the nations are watching and taking note. That certainly we see, and the Torah says that the nations will recognize, even the nations will recognize that it was the Jews' failure. I guess I don't know exactly what point in history I can't come up with an exact quote that says that, but that's what the Ramban says. And what struck me was that the Ramban seems to be making a point. He doesn't say it explicitly, but he comes pretty close to being open about it. He says, the Torah describes that everyone will observe these miracles on a national scale, with the implication being that when it comes to an individual level, that's not necessarily obvious. And we all understand this, right? Because the Ramban just says that we all have to believe that every fiber of our being, there is no nature. Everything is the consequence of sin. If we do that, then we would say that anytime somebody's sick, we say, oh, they must have done a sin. We don't do that. That's wrong, right? We certainly know the idea of why bad things happen to good people, why righteous people seem to suffer, and wicked people seem to prosper. One of the most fundamental questions that is grappled with is a book in Tanakh that describes this problem called Sefer Ekev. Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, struggled with this. He asked Hashem why the baby is being killed in Egypt, and Hashem says, save one if you want, and he saved the baby, and the baby turns out to be wicked, very detrimental to the entire Jewish people, the idol of Micha. But this is just such a fundamental part of the human experience. Everyone understands this. So we say, look, we don't know the ways of Hashem. I think the Chol Chavavos says 5 reasons that fundamental concepts which can be reasons for why bad things happen to good people, and etc. And he says, but you never know which one of the 5 it is under any given circumstance. So you don't really ever know anything. And that's probably the whole idea of free will. I think that's one of the reasons, if I'm not mistaken. Free will is predicated on the idea that we really can't unravel. So on a national scale, I guess it doesn't deprive us of our free will, because even though we can step back from Jewish history and people say it's the most miraculous thing ever, and yet somehow people still manage to, we marvel at it and we go about it our merry way. So it doesn't seem to take away our free will. If it happened on an individual level, maybe it would be harder for us.
Does the individual have a clue as to which of the 5 reasons that could be there?
I think the Chalafahos' point is that no one really has a clue. Yov didn't have a clue. And actually, in Yov's case, you haven't done anything wrong. We should. So what we say is, we're supposed to look. That's kind of the irony of it. We're supposed to look and try to identify cause. And the Gemara even tells you how to do it. To see if it was this. If not, if all else fails, maybe it's Hashem doing it out of love to elevate you. So, if there was always once there's somebody asked for the people in this he's not going to, it's not playing a game.
Right.
And when we have prophets, we went to the prophets and they told us when we have if this message he knows it's unclear, so he wants us to try our best. That doesn't mean that whatever answer we come up with, to be right, but if we're trying our best, Hashem knows that we try to. We don't have to worry. But what if I'm not getting the message? If Hashem will make it clear, if He wanted it to be clear, we to try our best and to understand, to know that I'm just getting, like everything else, we have things that we don't know. It's part of the challenge in life. But it doesn't mean we should understand that we don't know for sure.
About that, we should say, if it's going to help, if the team comes to help you, that's the answer.
Right, that's the answer. That's what Hashem wants to do. Right. But what struck me was that we have this second paragraph of shall we say it every day, twice a day, and it's the purpose of it is to motivate us. That is purpose. We're supposed to recognize the consequences. We're not really Jewish if we don't. We're not really observant Jews if we don't understand that everything that happens is a consequence. At the same time, we're told that we absolutely have no clue of how the cause and effect works out, and almost by definition, we're not going to see it in our lives. So we're sort of commanded to perform this act of faith where we believe with every fiber of our being there is no nature. Everything is a consequence of sin. And yet, at the same time, believing that we're never going to figure it out, and there's no way to actually. So it's almost like these Jews would come up with this kind of thing, where we're supposed to impress upon ourselves constantly that everything that happens to me is a direct result of my actions, good or bad. And of course, there is absolutely no way that I can correlate it with the actual actions that I'm doing. So it's like one of these, you ever seen these puzzles they have in kids activity books who show like 4 kids and 3 kites and a bunch of lines like all intersecting. You have to try to trace them. So it's like that, but we'll never trace one thing to the other. It's like you open with if you're not an electrician, try to open up something, the fuse box you see you can't figure out what it is, but it's clear that these wires, everything connects to something, and everything is a purpose, and there is no, in those puzzles often there's one string that really doesn't lead anywhere. In this case, every string leads somewhere, but we don't know what it is. That doesn't make a difference. Even if you're not an electrician, for a fact you can't take a scissor and cut any of those wires, because if you do it, the thing won't work. And we have to feel the same way. Everything has an effect, and we believe, and it's supposed to motivate us. Not just that, we believe on some level. We're supposed to feel I've got to do the mitzvahs because if I do them, I'll be successful, and if I don't, I'll fail. Will I see it? Absolutely not. I'll have no idea. I think the Aruch HaSiddikim says this when it talks about Teshuvah. Probably quoting somewhere else, because much of the book is really citations from other places. If a person does Teshuvah and things start going wrong, he shouldn't despair. They should feel like, I think he says that maybe until that point, they had sins that were not expiated, and Hashem is now, the person is doing Teshuvah, Hashem is giving them the opportunity to cleanse themselves. And David Meir said, by his father's funeral, that he would use his father as an example many times. My father becomes observant, and then his wife gets sick. He could have said, "This is what I get. I changed my life around. I decided to become religious." That's just an example. One example of a million examples of people who do the right thing, and it seems to lead to a negative. But we know that's not the case. We have to believe. So we used to say people should go out of town and move to far-flung Jewish communities, and don't worry how it will affect your family because you're doing it. He said, in principle, that's a real consideration, a serious one. But we have a special guarantee that when a person is doing it for the purpose of bringing Jews closer to Torah, then he'll be protected. So what about But then he had a couple of generations of students, and some struggle. In some cases, the family struggle. I said, well, that would have happened anyways. And, it takes a lot of confidence to look someone in the eye and say, I stand by my words. I have nothing to do with your decision to go out. You did it for the right reason. You did the right thing. So that would have happened anyway. People struggle when they live in entire communities too. Right. But you have to have confidence to do that. That's what we believe. We believe that when you do the right thing happens. And yeah, that's a couple of times. I think the Hebron massacre of 1929, right? That was called Palestinian settler violence against the Israelis. What? When Moshe Warchem was, I believe he was there. Yeah. And so a lot of the number of the Talmudic yeshiva was in Hebron at the time. It was the Hebron yeshiva now, but it's not. Now it's not Hebron anymore. There aren't too many Jews left in Hebron. The Arabs were successful and discouraging. What? Yeah, there are Jews, right. And when we went to Israel, we toured. They had, right. I think Hebron still has a small presence. And of course, they have the most important residence there, the Cave of Machpelah. But so Hebron was a yeshiva, a famous Talmudic yeshiva. I believe it was divided into two parts. Part stayed in Europe, obviously that didn't survive, and the part that went to Israel, including the Alter of Talmud himself. I think made Aliyah. I think he already passed away at that point in the late 20s. So they went on a rampage and massacred a bunch of people, including a number of yeshiva students, including some Americans. There were Americans who had gone. That was a big deal. It wasn't like today. It was like a thing to hop on a plane right after high school, study and see the sights, and then come back home and start college a year later. Americans went to Eastern Europe too. I'm not sure which was a bigger stretch, but they were really committed and very vertically oriented individuals. Even at a young age, as teenagers went to study abroad. American kids. It was not a thing in those days, but there were people who did it, and there was a particular, I think it was from Chicago, I forgot his name, a boy who was studying something. She was killed, I think a teenager. I believe there were Mishloachim, like fundraisers who would travel around. This was a time honored Jewish practice. Going back centuries, I think it went back to ancient Babylonia, as a matter of fact. The head yeshiva was there, and they sent people around fundraising. Certainly in Europe it was a thing. And I believe the background of the story was it was a fundraiser. I don't know if he fundraised for the Talmudic yeshiva or for some other cause, but I think he had been instrumental in convincing this boy to study at the yeshiva in the first place. So he would travel around. Chicago was one. I think Chicago was one of his stops, and he had known the family, and the boy had been inspired to go study in Israel, and then he got killed in the film. So he couldn't face the family after that. So he still did his fundraising, but he went. And at some point, the boy's father bumped into this shluch. I said, I haven't seen him for a while. What's going on? And he said, honestly, I couldn't come back to you after I was responsible. You sent your son to Israel, and how can I come back to you? Father said, are you kidding? You did me such a favor. He said, clearly my son's life was meant to end at that young age. Had I not sent him to study in Israel, he would have died of natural cause or some other cause. And this way he got to die, thanks to Hashem, having studied in Israel. You give me such a gift. I know that my son, said that. And, it's easy to say, but that was his reaction. It wasn't like a scripted encounter. It wasn't like he said that and wrote a letter. This is what he said when the guy bumped into him. And said, that was his, he didn't say, yeah, but let's forget about that. So that's an amazing, but he's totally right. It's not always easy to see it that way. That's what it means. That's what the Rambam means. That's what the Torah means. But it says you have to believe with every fiber of your being that when you do the right thing happens. When it seems like it isn't, it is, and we just don't necessarily. We don't necessarily know cause and effect, right? It's like people say that getting back to, that's a lot of what they do. There's so much confusion in the world, so hard to tell lies from truth. Why? It's so hard in the digital age. So much information. Right? Everybody thought the more information, the more access to information, the more people will see the truth, will resolve conflict. It just makes people. So when people say, you can look at something, but you don't know what you're seeing. You don't know cause and effect. That's what they do with Israel as well, right? They say, is Israel the victim of the problem, or is Israel causing the problems? Depends what you want to see, what you want to say. So same fact, different interpretation. Same thing with our lives in general. What's the cause and what's the effect? So the answer is we don't know. So it comes down to belief. And that's what you see so powerfully. As the Chaim says that technology is given to us to help us understand things that we struggle. So people had a hard time. What does it mean that someone's always watching? Now no one has a problem. Someone's always watching. So many things that in the old days would require right, exactly. Responsive, things happen that I make a decision in private and nobody knows about it, and then I walk down the street and something happens as a result. It happens all the time now. You walk somewhere and your phone is telling you that you want to buy a certain product because it measures you. Even Google can do that. Why can't Hashem do it for the same? The Chavetz Chaim says that technology helps us understand things that we couldn't understand previously. So now you would think that this idea, that the more people are connected with each other, the more they can talk and share information, the more truth will come out. And if anything, it seems the opposite. And what does it show? What's the lesson? It's the lesson that the Moshe Sfarim taught us centuries ago. That we're skeptical about it. Torah tells us this. That we'll tell you a whole story, and we'll say, because in his heart he was angry. You say, come on, is that really what the story was all about? But you see it so clearly now because you say, come on, the big decisions, societal changes, it really comes about like Karl Marx said, it's economic forces, it's this, it's that. No, it's not. It's because some guy got angry, some guy had an ego, and what you see is that everybody, millions, billions. Half of them say it's black, and half of them say it's white. Half of them say it's right, and say it's left. So which shows you that the human mind is driven by impulses, by emotions, by midos, which is what the Torah told us all along. Right? We didn't believe it. We said, no, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of logic, no, it's all basic human desires, impulses, and what that tells you is, to get ahead of the game, you use the Torah to Torah sort of catapults you above that. You say, let's not just act on instinct. Let's take a step back and think about it. What's really driving it? Just the idea that you stop and think about what's really driving me, you're so ahead of the game. It's because you're not just. It's frightening to think that in a world with so much advancement and so much technology, so much of humanity, including us, behave like creatures of the herd and just instinct. But that's what the Torah tells us, and that's what we see with our eyes. And therefore, it's how a little bit of mindfulness and a little bit of the decision to act based on a set of higher principles can be such a game changer. It seems almost hard to imagine when the world seems so full of concrete reality, and yet you see concrete reality isn't real because nobody can agree on what concrete reality actually is. And everybody thinks that half the people are dead wrong. Clearly, as Rabbi Mechanic says, he says, how can there's a billion people who believe in Muhammad? Are they all wrong? Well, yeah, a billion Christians believe in Jesus. They think they're wrong, and those billion Christians believe. Well, the other billion, a billion people can clearly be wrong. So what do you have to go on? We have our Masorah, we have our tradition.
They think they do so.
So he said, if you go out into a picnic in the woods, and all of a sudden a bear appears at the edge of a clearing, and everyone's running away, and 1,000 people, 100 people are running in one direction, and 3 people are running in the other direction, and you say, let me follow the larger group. But then you take a look and you see that the 100 people are all wearing T-shirts, St. Joseph's School for the Blind, and each one has their hand on the shoulder of the guy ahead, and there's one counselor in the front. So that's one person versus 3 people. It's not 100 people versus 3. It's one person versus. So he said, if a billion people are all following one person who said something and said, trust me, and we have a small group, but we're following the example of an entire generation of our ancestors who said, trust us, we have the larger group. That's the panic right there. Okay. So, okay, anyways, on that note.
So I think last, whatever, Rabbi talked about emotions, and, we have emotions and passion, and like, it's part of Torah, and I always keep thinking that, I've said before that if you follow emotion, you're sunk, because then you won't follow halacha as well, and
you can't follow emotion. You should lead your emotions, not follow your emotions. You should lead your emotions, not follow your emotions. Emotions are like a tool. Like emotions are like a car. You have to get in the car and drive it. You can't get in the car and say, press the gas and say, let me see where the wheel takes me. You have to steer the car, and it's a very powerful tool to get you much farther than you can get on foot, or like a horse. Right? You can't get on a horse and say the horse knows where to go. I mean, it does, but not where you want it to go. You have to be the one leading the horse.
Right, so
you can't do something because you're angry, but you can be angry about what you're supposed to be angry about. That's a lot of Muslims. Right. You can't deny emotions anyway. Hashem put them in. They're tools.
Yeah, they're tools.
So
like the ones, like as we said on Shabbos, tools have a use. Some tools are mostly usable. Some tools are mostly not usable, but they have occasional uses. And some tools are also
segueing back.
Segueing back, yeah.
Well, you told me about all the information that's out there, but the people who supply that information are suspects.
That's also true, right? Sometimes the sources of information are suspect as well, right?
And before you said about hidden miracles, but that's not. But everything is like breathing, like that's not.
Hidden miracles, what he means, from context, he seems to be saying, hidden miracles seems to mean things which follow the laws of nature, but we believe that it's not, that follow the laws of nature, but they're consciously orchestrated. In other words, if a person goes to medical school and earns a big salary, so the natural person would say, it's natural that this person was born with an affinity for medicine, and they went to medicine school. And a hidden miracle approach would say, Hashem wanted this person to earn this much money. Hashem put him in their head to become a doctor and help him get good, gave him a good teacher and get good grades. But it was from Hashem who wanted this result. So that's what he calls hidden miracles. And they're not miracles, like the Purim story was a hidden miracle. You could explain it, the king did this and the lady did that and Esther did that. But the miracles that they say, look at all the pieces. This couldn't have happened unless Hashem wanted it to happen. So he's saying really everything is like that. So there's a lot of philosophy about how Hashem does that, but the point is that even if everything works within the laws of nature, but we believe that it's not nature just taking its course. It's Hashem using nature to bring about a specific intentional result.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.